Hey guys, it's Justine here from I Should Read That, and today I am bringing you a slightly delayed November wrap-up. It is currently the middle of December. I am technically on hiatus, but it is the last working week of the year for me, and I'm feeling quite festive. Christmas is right around the corner, and I'm really excited. So I have been on hiatus for probably about a week, but like mentally I've been on hiatus for quite a while. I've just been feeling really burnt out and just not particularly enthusiastic about taking the time to film and to edit and to post and all of that stuff. So I took a bit of a hiatus, and naturally as soon as I went on a hiatus, I felt so much better. And now I want to start filming again. So I don't know when this is going to be going up. It may be something that I hold on to for a little while because I'll be too lazy to edit it. Maybe I'll put it up really soon, but regardless, this might be the end of my hiatus, so hello. So the month of November kind of sucked for me, and I think it sucked for a lot of people. It wasn't the strongest month just in terms of life. It was quite stressful for a few reasons. So let's run through why November kind of sucked. First of all, we had the US election, which was extremely stressful. I don't live in the States anymore, but as an American, I am very invested in elections and voting and all of that, and wanting to get certain people out of the White House so that we could have some kind of semblance of a society again in the States. And fortunately, the election did go the way that I wanted it to go, but it took forever. I think it's only really just wrapping up now. It's been stressful. So we had that, and then the day after the election, we decided to temporarily move into my parents' place, hence this exciting new background, which you've seen in a couple of recent videos, because the UK, or sorry, England, people got really upset when I said the UK last time, England was going into a second national lockdown, and we decided that we would rather be in a house with, you know, other people rather than just in a two-bed flat. So we packed up the cats, we packed up tons of stuff, including quite a lot of books if you've seen my November TBR, and we came over here. That was quite stressful because it turns out that one of the cats, I won't say who, doesn't deal well with cars and stress, and we had some bodily malfunctions. All kinds of bodily malfunctions happen in her carrier, so it's quite a smelly ride. And then she had to have a little bath. Her little bow tie collar had to have a bath. It was not my favorite day. And then, of course, on the 4th, we did go into lockdown. We are out of lockdown now, but currently I am in tier 3. Like, it's been stressful. So on top of all of that, I had work hitting year-end deadlines and stuff, and now that is over. That's alleviated a lot, but this is all just a really roundabout way of me saying that November was not my strongest reading month. And when I tell you I read 9 books, it sounds pretty good. A lot of those were novellas. We had a couple of audiobooks. We have a cat fight going on in the background. Yeah, it was not the highest page count, so be a little wary of me saying I read 9 books this month, because that didn't really happen. Regardless of the number and sort of page count, I did have an interesting reading month in November because my ratings ranged from super great, amazing candidate for favorite books of the year to hugely disappointing, super anticipated book that I did not like. So we're kind of all over the place in terms of ratings and sort of what I thought. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm gonna move over a little bit so that I can put the cover up on the screen, but not block Dax, because she's really cute behind me. She might join me. She did last time. It was pretty adorable. But anyway, the first book that I read in the month of November, I had like 50 pages left of by the time November rolled around. It's really a carryover from October, but this is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. This book is a classic for a reason. Tons of people love this book, tons of people have read this book, tons of people love the Hitchcock film that was made of it, tons of people say that we don't talk about the Netflix version of the film that was recently released. This is just a much, much adored novel. And it's one I've been wanting to read for a very long time. It's been sat on my shelf since Christmas last year when I bought myself a copy with a Waterstones gift card that I received for Christmas, and it seemed like kind of October, November was the perfect time to pick it up. And I ended up really, really enjoying this one. Rebecca is a little bit of a slow burn, so we follow a character who we really only know as Mrs. De Winter, as she is swept up in a sort of whirlwind romance with a man named Maxim De Winter. So she is sort of a lower class young woman. She's like 20, 21, and she's sort of like the paid companion to this very wealthy lady. They're on holiday. She meets this man. He's a wealthy widower, and he sort of sweeps her off of her feet. They get married, and she gets yanked up into this whole new social class that she knows nothing about, really. So the other thing is that Maxim De Winter happens to be a widower because his wife Rebecca died very tragically in an accident about 6 months prior. So when Mrs. De Winter and her husband get back to Manderley, which is his sort of country estate, she not only has to learn the ropes of running a giant estate and sort of stepping into society and not, making a fool of herself or her husband, she also has to get out from under the shadow of Rebecca, who is a much beloved woman. She was fabulous, she was glamorous, she was just this incredible woman that everyone loved, and she's very much a different kind of person to Mrs. De Winter. So this book is really, to me, about a woman who is trying to find her place in this new world, and we watch her grow as a character. This is a really in-depth character study. I ended up really enjoying this book. It was one that I didn't really know a huge amount about before I started. We did end up watching the Hitchcock film when I was about halfway through the book, so I knew how it ended, unfortunately, but I'm really glad that I did watch the movie because I probably wouldn't have gotten around to it otherwise if I hadn't watched it at that time. But I did end up giving this 4 out of 5 stars. I thought it was a really, really excellent read. The next book that I read was an audiobook listen. This is The Wicked Cometh by Laura Carlin. This was a good historical, kind of gothic-y kind of book. It's one that I enjoyed but didn't leave a huge impression on me. In this book, we follow a young woman named Hester who was previously a sort of lower middle class young woman until her family fell into poverty. So she lives with her aunt and uncle in London, and she is just desperately hoping for some way to improve her life. And she ends up having a chance encounter with a member of the Brock family, and she gets kind of pulled into this family. They're very aristocratic, and they are philanthropists, and she's sort of like assigned as a ward to Rebecca, who is the daughter of the family, to be educated as kind of a way to prove that the poor of England can be sort of educated and pulled up from their stations and learn to better themselves. That's kind of the main part of the book. What I was expecting, just judging from like the blurb, is a little bit more to do with these kind of missing children in London. There are these disappearances. I think her cousin disappears, a young girl she knows disappears, and she investigates, but it's not really what this book is about. So I think I did have some expectations of what this book was going to be. That was totally my fault. I misread the like blurb. So that's definitely on me, but I do think that I was expecting something a little bit different. I was expecting something a little bit more detective-y. Not necessarily a detective novel, but some aspect of detecting. What I did really enjoy about this was the relationship between Hester and Rebecca, because this is a sapphic book. Two do end up forming a relationship, and watching that happen is a really, really lovely thing, and I really, really enjoyed their chemistry and their interactions. Otherwise, this wasn't a hugely memorable one for me. I'm doing this wrap-up a little bit later than I usually tend to, and I feel like that has definitely had a bit of an impact on how much I remember from this book, sort of my thoughts on this book, because it's just sort of like breezed past me. So I did enjoy it. I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 stars, probably 3.5 out of 5 stars. I would recommend it if you're looking for sort of like gritty historical fiction, but I would sort of temper your expectations of what you're going to get in this book. After that, I read a hugely anticipated book for me. This is The Year of the Witching by Alexis Henderson. Unfortunately, this is that highly anticipated read that ended up really disappointing me that I mentioned at the beginning of this video. Everyone's talking about how much they love this book, and I had such high expectations going into this, but for some reason this is the second in a row of like really disappointing witchy books, because I did end up DNFing The Once and Future Witches by Alexi Herrera, which is one of my like most anticipated books of the year. I was so excited for that and I just couldn't deal with it. So this is the second witchy book, and I'm wondering if like I'm cursed, or if like, I don't know, like I need a good witchy book because I desperately, desperately want to read good witchy stuff and I'm not finding it. So I'm not going to have spoilers for this, but if you want to go into this book knowing as little as possible, I am going to go maybe a little bit more in depth into the book and sort of things that happen in this book. So if you want to go into it knowing like nothing, you can go ahead and skip to the timestamp on the screen. I'm not going to like spoil stuff, but I am going to talk about sort of parts of the book and the plot and stuff, and why I was disappointed in them or why I liked them. So yeah, go ahead and skip. You've had a little bit of time, so I'm gonna go ahead and get started. There were parts of this book that I liked. I really enjoyed the world. So we follow this young woman named Emmanuelle in this sort of fantasy. It feels like a feminist dystopian book because Emmanuelle lives in this sort of like small cut off town that sort of super hyper religious, sort of like what I would say is kind of like a sect of like fantasy Christianity, and it has a lot of those sort of parallels to kind of Christianity and stuff. And I really liked the world. I liked the fact that it wasn't like you find out that they're really living in New York City in the distant future or anything like that. This is just a straight up fantasy book, but it has that kind of historical, dystopian, feminist dystopian vibe to it, which was really cool. I really liked that. And I really liked the fact that the baddies in this book, the kind of the witches that this religion sort of rallies against, were real and they were a threat. That was really cool. I really liked seeing like there being an actual evil in this book and in this world. So that was really cool. I really enjoyed that. And I really liked the first kind of, I'd say, quarter of the book. It was a little bit slow, but I enjoyed the world and I enjoyed a lot of the setup. I think for me where this book lost its way was the very strange pacing. I thought the pacing was completely off. We have moments later on in this book where she goes to a place and you'd expect that to be like 50 pages or so because it's an important thing that she's doing. She's gone in 5 pages and it's really jarring. It feels like this book could have had an extra 100 pages added to it just to flesh out the plot a little bit because it's so all over the place. We spend tons of time on some unimportant thing, no time on an important thing, and then suddenly we're skipping a week ahead and it's just like, I feel like pages have fallen out of my book. So I really found that jarring. I thought that the characters were really off, especially toward the end. I felt like sort of motivations that were set up at the beginning of the book she didn't really follow through on. I felt like characters were making decisions that seemed to be strange for them and like who we knew them to be. And a lot of the character motivations just didn't make any sense. And I really hated the ending. I really hated the ending to the point where I don't think this was the original ending to this book. I think that the ending was quite different and maybe like her editor was like, we don't think readers are gonna like this ending, you need to change it to something else. Like they pretty and pinked it or something. I don't know, but the ending was bizarre. It didn't fit with the book and I fucking hated it. So that was just such a huge disappointment. I felt like we had a lot of potential for this book. She talks about some really interesting things. We have people in this community who are Black are segregated, and we don't really go into that a huge amount. We have sort of the plight of the young women in this community, and we go into that, and then it sort of drops off a cliff. There was so much that could have been so good in this book and could have been so amazing, and I felt it really lost its way. So I ended up giving this 2 out of 5 stars. I very much considered giving it 1 star, but I do think that those elements that I talked about at the beginning, the things that I liked, did really save this book. If those things weren't there, the really kind of cool world building and all of that, and these aspects of this religion weren't there, this would have been just an absolute disaster. Oof, oh my god. My leg is asleep. Oh my god. Okay, what did I read next? I have, Beyond the Dragon's Gate by Yoon Lee. This is a short story, and I basically was teetering on the edge of a slump when I finished The Year of the Witching. So I decided to pick up something just really short by an author I knew I really liked. Yoon Lee is, of course, the author of Phoenix Extravagant, which is one of my favorite books of the year. I have a full review. I'll post the card thingy at the top of the screen so you can check it out. And I really ended up enjoying this one. So because this is basically just a short story, it's really hard to kind of summarize it and not give it all away. But basically we follow a character named Anna, and her sort of research into AI has made her an expert, but also kind of cost her everything. So she ends up being called in by the military because they need her expertise to prevent the destruction of their AI fleet. So this is a really, really interesting and very insightful short story, especially in terms of identity and, like, I don't know, autonomy? I don't really know the right words, but Yoon Lee is a trans man, and I feel like you could really get his experience sort of filtered through this book, and it was a really, really fabulous read. It's very short. I would highly recommend picking it up on Kindle. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. Next up is a novella that I loved. I absolutely loved this, and I think that this really did a lot of favors towards saving my reading month, because at this point, this was definitely like at the end of the month when I was reading this and other things, and this sort of reignited my excitement to actually read, which was really good. So this is The Murders of Molly Southbourne by Thompson. This is fabulous. It's the coolest concept ever, and I really, really, really enjoyed this. So you're gonna have to stick with me a little bit on this one. It is a bit of a weird premise, but basically we have this young woman. She wakes up chained up in a basement, and she's very confused as to how she got there. She has no memory of how she got here whatsoever. And this woman comes in, named Molly, and she basically starts telling her life story. So this woman, Molly, has this strange condition where every time she bleeds, she basically creates a clone of herself, unintentionally, that tries to kill her. So imagine, if you will, being a woman, and every time you bleed, something tries to kill you. Going from childhood scrapes and bruises to menstruation to, you know, having sex for the first time, just everyday bumps and scrapes and cuts. If you bleed, something will come after you and try to kill you. So this is basically her life story. She tells it from when she's a child through her adult years, and sort of honing her body to be able to fight herself. Literally dozens of clones of herself can come after her at any time. She tries to have relationships. Her parents are basically training her to be this like mega killing machine from the time that she's a child so that she can survive. It's a really, really, really cool concept. I absolutely loved this book. I thought that the sort of pacing was incredible. I really, as I say, loved the whole concept of it. I really liked Molly as a character, and I loved the way the story kind of unfolded, and just I tore through this from beginning to end in one sitting. I just thought it was absolutely fabulous. This is definitely a contender for my best books of the year list. I gave this 4.5 out of 5 stars, and I would highly, highly, highly recommend it. Then I read Frost Gilded by Stephanie Burgess. This is another short story, and it is the concluding book in the Harwood spellbook series of short stories and novellas. So you've heard me talk about the Harwood spellbook series many, many times. In fact, I believe I recommended it in my most recent winter recommendations video. They are lovely fantasy romances. They're sweet, they're well written, they're really fun, and I just love them. They're like the closest thing I can find to cozy fantasy, and they're just fabulous. And while I'm really sad that the series is ending, I was really glad to get the chance to read this. So this is almost like just a nice sort of Christmassy type story. We have Cassandra Harwood in the college for female magicians that she starts in the first book, and it's basically just like her trying to celebrate her anniversary with her husband, and things run amok and run awry. There's fae in the woods, there's, you know, young ladies casting spells all over the place. It's just fun. It's just really good fun. I think that if you've not picked these up and you're looking for some like really light, nice, cozy reading this Christmas, they are so good. I talk about what these books are actually like about in that winter recommendations video, so that's linked above, it's linked below, you can go ahead and check it out there. Highly recommended. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars, and I would probably give the whole series overall a 4 to 4.5 out of 5 stars. Next up, I read a book called Letters from the Dead by Sam Hircum. This is the second book in a series of kind of like gothic-y historical detective fiction, but with a definite supernatural twist, and I really enjoyed this. So I've not read the first book in this series. I hadn't heard of it before, but I was offered a copy of the second one, being told that it was totally fine to just jump right in, which it totally was, and I ended up really enjoying this, and I am thinking about picking up the first book in the series and going ahead and reading that too, because this was really, really good. So this book follows a young man in Edwardian England named Thomas Bexley, and after a case in Wales that he solved over a year ago, which is the plot of the first book, the events of the first book, he is haunted. He's quite literally haunted. He sees these horrific, ghastly figures everywhere. They haunt his home, they, you know, haunt him wherever he goes, and he sort of descends into alcoholism as a result, and he sort of gets pulled out of his stupor at the beginning of the book and pulled into the police station because there is a kidnapper and murderer on the loose in London. They're calling this man the Wraith. So basically he kidnaps people from their homes and they completely disappear without a trace, and they desperately want to find this man. And he's never left any evidence except for one time, and that is a fingerprint. And it happens that this fingerprint matches the mentor that Thomas Bexley had many, many years ago, and is kind of he's almost like a hugely respected forensic scientist. He's the person who's developing a lot of the methods that police are using to capture criminals. So what the hell is his fingerprint doing at the scene of this kidnapping? So Thomas is very concerned, and he decides he's gonna go try to find his mentor and figure out what's going on. It was really fun. I really, really enjoyed this. I really, really liked the fact that the supernatural stuff, it's there. It's not one of those situations where like, oh, they're drinking a lot and they're hallucinating and it's their guilt that's haunting them. No, dude's haunted, and it's quite disturbing, some of the stuff that he sees, and it's really cool. I really, really enjoyed that fact. I really like there's a side character who comes in, a young woman who is the sister of one of the kidnap victims, who sort of becomes almost like a sidekick to him. We go from London to the north of Scotland in this and back, and it's just really good fun. I really enjoyed this one. I think that if you're looking for like a straight up kind of gothic book, maybe, maybe not, but if you're looking for something that does have, for sure, supernatural, crazy stuff, it gets pretty wild, and are just a really fun read, I would highly recommend this one. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read another book that is a contender for Best Book of the Year. I was so happy to have this in my hands. I loved it. I loved it so, so, so much. Completely what I expected because I adored the first book, which was my favorite book of 2019. This is The Call of the Bone Ships by R.J. Barker. Love these books. I love them so much. They're so good. They're just, oh, they're just wonderful. They're hard. They're not like fuzzy and fluffy. They're hard books in like a grim, grim society, but there's something about them that's just inherently optimistic. It's about the good in people and how people can turn their lives around, and just, oh, it's so good. I love this book so much. So basically the sort of context for this series is that we follow the society called the 100 Isles, and it's a bunch of islands. It's a seafaring society, but because these islands are quite small and there's not a lot of trees to make ships, they build their ships out of these massive, massive dragon bones, these sea dragons that were basically hunted to extinction for their bones. And because these sea dragons are now extinct, no more bone ships can be built. So as they start to rot and start to fall apart, the society begins to fall apart, and this war that they're at with the Gaunt Islanders, who are another sort of seafaring nation, really gets cranked up to see who can have the most ships, who can have the most firepower. So in this first book, a sea dragon is spotted for the first time in decades, and it's a race to be able to either save the dragon or to hunt it down and kill it for its bones. And so we carry on from the events of the first book, and oh, Jorn Twinner, our main character, he just goes to hell and back in these books, and I love him, and I just want to like sit him down in a comfy armchair with a cup of tea and just let him have a rest. Because he goes through so much, but he has this wonderful character growth that continues into the second book. He has this wonderful relationship with his captain, whose name is Mias, who's this sort of legendary figure in their society. Oh, I love these books so much. Please read them. Read them and then talk to me about them, because I'd love that. That would make me really happy. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. It was fabulous. I cried. I'm sending my therapy bills to RJ. And the very last book that I read in the month of November was The Tea Dragon Society by Katie O'Neill. This is a teeny, teeny, tiny graphic novel, and it is so sweet, and it is so cute, and I loved it so much. So in this book, we follow a girl who is a blacksmith, and one day she stumbles upon a tea master and his tea dragon. So the dragons grow tea leaves, and you cultivate them and you brew them, and it's wonderful, and everything is nice and happy, and it's all about friendship and respect and love, and it's just so cute. There's no plot in this. It's just cute and it's adorable, and I loved it. The illustrations are great, and I cannot wait to read the next one, which I think is the Tea Dragon Festival, and then I think there's a third one coming out next year that's like the Tea Dragon Masquerade, maybe? I don't know. I don't care. I'm so excited. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. It was so cute. It's like 60 pages, and it was everything that I needed. So my battery is dying, so I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this up. Those are the books that I read in the month of November. Not the strongest reading month for me, but I did read some stuff that I really, really enjoyed. So I would love to hear in the comments below what you read in the month of November, if you read any of these books, if you have them in your TBR, or if you have anything that you want to shout out. I post bookish content to this channel fairly frequently, so go ahead and hit subscribe, check back soon, and I will see you next time.